people say AI is going to come taking my job. No, AI is going to come and take away the job. So of the parts of the job that you don't want to do. Oftentimes as a leader, the skill that I had to learn was I had to learn to listen.
Mm.
And I really had to learn on that. So I always like to ask the question, is there something that I'm missing here?
Welcome to KPI Fireside. Our mission is simple: to improve companies and to improve careers through continuous improvement. In every episode, we explore the spark, the moment, the mindset, or the method that ignites real change. Whether you're just starting out or leveling up, you'll find the insights and inspiration to fuel your next improvement. Welcome back to KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. I am your host, Keith Norris. Today, our guest is Reed Schell. Reed brings more than 30 years of hands-on experience leading enterprise delivery and transformation with a practical focus on what actually works. He teaches project management and artificial intelligence at the University of Utah and advises organizations on applying AI responsibly without losing human judgment or accountability. Reed is a Shingo Institute alumni, which influences his perspective grounded in execution, continuous improvement, and making modern tools support people, not replace them. Outside of work, Reed likes to restore Volkswagen Beetles and likes to apply the same system thinking and problem solving to his mechanics as he does to his professional trade. So welcome to the show, Lee.
Well, thank you, Keith. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm just very, very excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I always like to start the podcast off with a little section we call the spark. And for you, I know you've been doing this for a little while. I think you've been in this line of work for quite a while. I'm not sure if you've, when you first got involved in this line of work, but tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get here?
Yeah, probably right off the bat, I was struggling. I've been doing project management for years, Keith, and I was really struggling with this whole quality element around my projects. I had projects that I found that I was delivering, and we would have all these issues and we'd have all these delays because we were attacking the things at the end. And lo and behold, I said, I've got to figure out what this quality thing is. So I dug into Deming. I went and visited Mr. Duran. And then I also read Philip Crosby, which just changed everything for me, where all of a sudden it was like, wow, he talks about this whole concept of integrate quality throughout the entire project. And so I said, oh, wow. And I said, how do I eliminate these repeats that we're doing at the very end of our project? Let's move them up. Let's get them moved up. And so it was a game changer to the point where I said, how do I take these principles and teach it to my team? So I put together a presentation, and then actually PMI grabbed a copy, project managers to grab a copy of it, and they said, hey, can you come present that to our conference? And which I did. And that was kind of that spark. And so ever since then, I've been in this constant mode of how do I get better, faster delivery? How do we add better quality and make sure I'm getting results at the same time?
I find that, the formative experiences are usually the ones that are peak high or peak low, learn from our successes or learn from their failures. Which of those, successes or failures, would you say have you learned the most valuable lessons?
Well, of course, it's always the failures, right? When you're, for many years, I coached girls basketball, and it was whenever we won, I was like, oh, great, we're good. But man, when we lost, I was back on the books and figuring out, what do we do? What plays do we need to run next week to make sure we get OW in our camp? So,
I love that. Yeah. You mentioned that some of the struggles or challenges that you had in the project management is what kind of drove you to dive in
yes.
more to solving problems. I think that innate need to solve problems is something that's human for sure. What are some of the notable ones that sent you on this path?
Yeah, probably a couple of projects that got me forced into the Agile camp there, Keith, is manifesto, which was 2001. So this was in the 90s. I was doing a project I recovered a project once for the Parks and Recs department. And because they were in trouble, throughout my career, I've been fortunate to have been able to take over some of these projects where they were in a failure mode, and they mainly just wanted me to turn it around. And so as part of the project, I looked at it and I realized that they had to be in front of the Idaho legislature in September. And I took this project over in June. We looked at what was out there to do, and there was so much to do. And there was no way we're going to make it, as I did my assessment. So I grabbed the deputy director and I said, Jane, we have a problem here. That we have I have a couple of best practices I can implement here, but for us to meet that, I'm going to focus on value on this one here. And so the first thing I did, I said, Jane, would you mind if I get together with your staff and let's list out everything we have, and let's identify things out there that are going to bring us the highest amount of value. And we did that. We actually eliminated a few items on the bottom of this that we could do it after we got there. And then the next thing I said, Jane, Ben, because we got such tight time frames on this project, we're going to get together with the team every single day. And you're more than welcome to come in, but we're just going to spend 15 minutes. We're going to get together and make sure that we're all coordinating. And then the other thing I need to do, Jane, is every Wednesday, I'm going to plan. I'd like to review with you what we got done the previous week, and I'm going to plan for the next week for you. And she said, that's great. But I need you to attend so you can make sure that we're focused on the right things. Well, needless to say, Keith, August, we were sitting in Lucky Peak Reservoir in Idaho with doing a barbecue because we got the project completed.
Really? And what was the project in this case? Is it one that you can talk about?
This particular one here was for the Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation. And the reason I tell that story is these were best practices that I was using as a project manager. And then when the Agile Manifesto shows up in 2001, I'm like, wow. And then the Scrum Guide shows up in 2009. I'm like, well, those I've been doing those. I've already been doing those. And so, my ability to adapt into Agile was so easy because a lot of the best practices I was doing was already what the Ken Schwabert and team had already figured out in the Scrum Guide.
Yeah.
Because what I just described to you was the daily stand up, the backlog refinement, and and what I said, whoa, this Agile thing can really help me streamline some projects. But more importantly, let's focus now on value instead of just following the plan.
In that, with the Parks and Recs, how did you define value? Who were the stakeholders, and what was the definition of value that you uncovered?
Yeah, it was the deputy director and her team. And it was fantastic because every week we actually kind of went through this, just like you do in Agile now today. We take it for granted now because at the time it was new, and so it was like, let's really define what our value equation is here. And let's make sure that we're delivering because the goal in Agile that I always tell people is we're here to deliver the highest amount of value in the shortest amount of time. And so that's our mantra that we march to. So with the tools that we have in Agile, we can now deliver faster.
You said something that I think is interesting, and I think it's an interesting pattern. You talked about how you were following some of these practices before the Agile Manifesto came out. I'm reminded of the intro to the book 7 Habits by Stephen Covey, where somebody said something along the lines of, hey, this is such great stuff. How did you come up with this? And his response was like, I didn't really discover anything. I just kind of put it together. This is stuff that's been known for a long time. And I think that that's an interesting view on a lot of just truth, stuff that is true, stuff that is good and useful. Is it comes in a lot of different languages and words, and you can package it a lot of different ways. But I think that's an interesting pattern between what might be called DMAIC or the Toyota production system, or what is becoming Agile. Like there's things about these systems that are just good behaviors of getting things done, whether it's the principles that Shingo talks about, or you mentioned a couple of rituals like the daily stand-up, those are great ones. So I think that's interesting that you maybe just stumbled is maybe not the right word, but you came across those even before they were presented to you as like a package.
Yeah. I didn't necessarily, I'm going to be honest with you. I picked them up from my colleagues at Nike, some of those best practices. And at Nike, we used to always call it the turbulent waterfall because we were in this constant state of how do we get our projects done faster? How do we get faster, at doing these? And so we actually had done some of the principles, like the daily stand-up was something, again, back in my old Nike days we were doing, and things like that. So yeah, very interesting.
Which of the following is more likely to get your projects done faster? Starting more projects or starting fewer projects?
Well, that's interesting you say, because one of the things Nike was extremely good at was knowing what the right balance was. What happens with a lot of companies, and I've ran PMOs in my career for both Albertsons and for a company called Family Search. And one of the issues we always had was was the adage of more projects, right? We always want to do more. And so Nike was very, very disciplined in the fact that they said, well, if we add this new project on, that means we have to close down these two. And they were really good at producing the value. And so it wasn't just like, hey, Reed, guess what? You're now managing 5 projects. It was also very, very keen on, let's make sure we only let Reed manage one and let's get it done because we see that's the highest value. And then we'll give them another one and things like that. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
some of those mantras that were there. On the flip side here though, too, the one thing I did find with Nike that I still have not experienced it again in any other company was culture. They were so keen on making sure that you had the culture. And because you had that just do it culture, we got a lot of stuff done. In my particular career, I always tell my students when I'm teaching project management, I got more stuff done at Nike than I did in the following 10 years after I left them.
Culture is such an interesting topic to me, and Nike has such an iconic brand and like the just do it. I'm just kind of imagining somebody in a meeting at Nike who's like, we should spend a little more time analyzing or debating this, and somebody's like, just do it. Like, how many times does that get dropped in?
Oh yeah. No, they actually moved very, very fast.
I bet. What are some of the other elements of like if you're describing the culture at Nike, every culture is a little bit unique, but what was it about the Nike culture that was notable?
Yeah, at the particular time, what was notable to me was just this balance that they had of we were getting a lot of work done, but they also had this very, very keen instance of making sure that they were taking care of their people. In other words, we know that you're running a marathon, but there were plenty of rest stops along the way to help you. And I think Nike was very, very keen on that. Very,
What
very
are
keen.
what are some examples of how you felt supported as individuals there?
Oh boy. A good example would be from a culture point of view. Again, this is the 90s, Keith. So on the Nike's campus, they had daycare. So parents who needed to work, they just dropped their kids off. It was no bigger thrill than to go into the lunchroom and see these kids with their parents at lunchtime.
Yeah.
Stores on campus, things to be able to help us out. And again, this was the 90s, so keep that in mind. That a lot of people gotten this type of stuff. So those were kind of one of the things. I think the biggest challenge here was sometimes was we sometimes felt entitled to some of these benefits that came to us, but they were important because they supported us in our work. Having a campus, the Bo Jackson Fitness Center, right on campus, and we worked really, really hard, but Nike was pretty keen on getting us out. I mean, everything from no meeting Fridays back, and again, this is the 90s, mind you. No meet. It was a sin. You weren't allowed to have meetings on Fridays.
Oh, I like that. That's another. I think with culture, every company culture is a little bit different, and the way that you describe a culture, it's always like some unique thing about that company. Like there's probably a few other companies that could get away with borrowing the "just do it" phrase, but I think that when a culture starts to be revealed, because cultures exist, but when you start to define what it is, it tends to people tend to refer to it around things like that. Oh, it's the no meeting Fridays. It's the um, just the rules that can exist in how things
Yeah,
get done
it
around.
does.
It's so interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and it was one of those things where I was searching for it as I went to other companies and I never found it. But
Mm.
ironically enough, I do want to mention something here. About a year ago, I was going through kind of a job transition, and I got an invite from Scott Sperry over at OC Tanner to come do a tour and it was amazing. And guess what? I found it. I felt it. You feel culture when you walk in the door. I felt it when I walked in there. Everybody knew everybody's name. And as I walked through the place, you could feel the energy in this building. It was unreal. The lean practices that they talk about were
Yeah,
right there.
they're
You know,
in
the
in practice.
stuff that I learned about in Shingo, I saw boards up, visual management boards in being done in real life, suggestions. I walked down and one of the really cool things that was they had lockers for the workers who worked on the fact and the people had lockers and they could decorate their lockers just like how you decorate your desk. It was their
That's
space.
awesome.
I walk around and they had a lunchroom, and it was interesting because they said, "Oh, by the way, there's Scott's office." And guess where it was? Right smack in the middle of the building. My last company, the CEO suite was you had to have special permission to step in the
Just to go there.
apartment. And they had special bathrooms and special, all this stuff there, not existing there. You see how those things are? So those are just a few things that jump out of it.
As I hear you say that, that resonates with me as one of the foundations of what people think of as lean, and just respect and respect for people. And I think that, you can feel respect. You can feel when you're being respected. You can feel when you're being disrespected. One of our previous guests, Michael Stevens, I love to, mention his work on the idea of respect. I also want to give a little mention to, there's a book called, I think it's called Better, Simpler Strategy, from Felix Oberholzer-Gee. And he talks about like business strategy being really simple. He says it's all about value. And, it's easy to think about values in the eyes of the customer. And he calls that like increasing willingness to pay. If it's better, faster, whatever, like people are willing to pay more if it's better generally. But he also uses this value stick called willingness to sell. And the measure for that is like, how can we make it so that the people, it's, I could say this and people might say it sounds like you want to pay people less. That's not it. How can you make it so that they would be willing to work for less because it's such a great environment? Like, oh, they have daycare. Oh, they have a 401k. Oh, they have all these other things. Oh, I have a great boss. Oh, I can have, I can do what I want to do with my locker. I think that's all based on that same idea of respect for people and finding ways to, because there's plenty of companies out there that do a great job with their products, and the outside, but maybe not so much with the inside. That's a great lesson.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And we can never forget leadership, right? Leadership plays such a critical role to build that culture.
Yeah, you've had some great companies. You got Nike, you got OC Tanner. OC Tanner, I've heard a lot of wonderful
No,
things.
I never worked for OC Tanner. I just had the great opportunity. I would love to, but I just had the opportunity to go through a tour over there, and
Okay.
it was just unbelievable. It was just really a great experience.
And that's interesting because you mentioned some of the things that you could see, some of the just artifacts of culture, where the executive desks were, the visual boards. I think that's interesting and, probably relevant to folks doing this kind of work, perhaps listening to our podcast here, is sometimes we get caught up in like the tools are just the tools, but sometimes the tools represent something more. The tools are like
Yes,
the physical manifestation of the conversation that you had, the respect that
yes,
you
exactly.
demonstrated, the
Yeah,
value.
yeah, interesting. Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by KPI Fire. Are you struggling to ignite real change in your continuous improvement program? Firestarter is your field guide. Real stories, proven strategies, no fluff. Get it now on Amazon. So let's talk a little bit about this AI
Oh, great.
work that you're doing. You've got a course that you developed with the University of Utah. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So at the University of Utah in professional ed, I had it's a 3 AI micro, so 3 courses, each of them 6 hours each. So it's mainly for the business professional through professional ed. And we first taught the first class, which was more of kind of an introductory class, and we had such demand. They said, "Can you create 2 more classes?" And the problem I had, Keith, was because AI is moving so fast, we had to leave it flexible enough. And so I'm really excited though. So the gist of the class here would be the first one's going to be more introductory, doing prompting, doing some of those things. The second class is more around the word that I use for this class here is my overly ambitious intern. In other words, how do I use AI as my overly ambitious intern? And so that the focus of that class is let's help the student or the participant to be able to just how do we use AI as this overly ambitious intern so I can do a better, so I can eliminate some of the things I'm doing. And then the third class is more focused around how do I get AI into my small business, into my department, into my company? What are the things I need to be aware of when I go into that? So that's kind of the gist of the micro of where it sits right now.
Those are 3 excellent angles there. A lot of people are using, everybody's using AI. I think a lot of people are using AI is being used personally, right? You get your free ChatGPT account. That into the enterprise, it requires a few more hurdles that you got to jump through. You got to answer a few more questions. Would you say some of the basics, some of the things that the companies want to know when they start to say, hey, should we let AI in here? What are some ways to keep it safe or to deploy it with, some level of comfort?
Yeah, I think it's well, as with any technology that I've done, it's always the change element, right? It's overcoming the fear. Everyone's afraid it's going to take my job and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So there's that. And I can go down that angle there in regards to, just the whole change management. How do we, so if my advice to leaders is really, really focus on the change aspect and be aware that, that you're about to introduce this new technology that is going to change some things. And it's not just the ERP system, Keith. It's not just a brand new mail client. This is something that's really going to change the way that we operate, and our ways of working are going to get modified. So you've got to really be aware of that one. So that there's the change element.
So what are the things and the skills that, let's say you've got somebody who's earlier in their career and they're looking for advice, like what do I go into based on AI? What do you think the things that are going to be in high demand and, versus what are the things that are maybe not worth investing? I don't know if you have a perspective on either one of those.
Yeah, I think expertise is still going to be there. The need to be able to do it. But and the reason I say that, Keith, is some of the use cases that we want to be able to do. People say AI is going to come taking my job. No, AI is going to come and take away the job, so of the parts of the job that you don't want to do. And where lean comes in is we need to understand the old learning to see model, right? I want to see what my processes are before I can actually put AI in. I need to, find what my process is. So I think the need out there for people in lean is going to grow exponentially. Why? Because my companies are going to be bringing these lean experts in so we can at least map out our processes. Because before I can do AI in your company, I need to understand the process. I need to understand where can I put an AI agent to eliminate some needs. And the example I'll use there, Keith, is let's tear a page out of the airline industry. We've been doing autopilot for years. Autopilot's an AI agent is all it is. But the opportunity to take a pilot and be able to find all the things that maybe it could monitor for us so it can focus on flying the plane. And the important part about this is we still are going to need the human in the middle. We're going to still need that pilot with his hands on the yoke flying that plane. But if I can take and all those instrument readings that you look at sometimes in a cockpit, if I can take all those and let my AI agent do those for me, could you imagine how much better off each business would be if that was the approach they took?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's, I definitely agree with that thought of there's a lot of opportunity for change practitioners, people that are skilled in change management, whether you call it agile or lean or green belt or Six Sigma, whatever. Like these are
Yeah.
various methodologies on how to manage this change. And particularly in enterprises, bigger companies, it's people just like you and me and others who have to open up the doors to let the AI in. And that can be scary. And getting people on board can be challenging. What are some of the lessons that you've learned? You mentioned that you had a
Yeah.
story maybe about
Right. I
change.
do, I do here, but
Yeah.
yeah, you hit on the exact element that I would recommend to any company is this is going to be a big change for you folks, and it's going to change a lot. And so therefore, in my particular career, I was doing project management, Keith, and I'm gonna commit I'm gonna tell one of my big sins that I used to have. I would get stuff done. I was a great project manager. I delivered on budget, on schedule, and everything else. But guess what I did? I left a wake of people behind me. And one day I had a great leader who said, Reed, you need to go to ProSci change management training. And I did. And I got my ProSci change practitioner from Tim Creasy and team. What an amazing revelation it came to me in the fact that I had all these tools of doing scope, schedule, budget, earn value management, schedule variance, but now I have these tools. I have the ADKAR model, awareness, all those things. I have these other tools now that I can use to couple when I do these projects to find out how do I prepare people for this brand new ERP rollout that I'm pushing on them.
Yeah.
And so those things.
I think that's a particularly interesting opportunity that will probably get bigger over the
Yes.
next decade. A lot of people are talking about how AI is going to displace a lot of people. And again, this is a topic that comes up all the time in big change management. If you're going to automate a line that was done by manual work, and now you're going to take 300 people and put them out of a job. Do you have the company culture, the organization where hopefully you are teaching people to think and find new opportunities? I always find it kind of sad when you hear about big, layoffs in big companies, particularly companies that you admire and you look to as like innovative. So I think that's also like a point of how important it is to be part of the change and to get involved in the change rather than just letting change happen and hopefully it doesn't happen to you.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah. And on that vein there, this is the quick story I was going to tell you is change has been around for a while. And the story I always like to tell my students is my grandma Wilma, she was a professional legal secretary in the 1960s. And if you remember from the old typewriters was, folks out there just, is we used to have these devices that we would press each individual key. And the very second that she would make a mistake, she'd hit the wheel and the paper would fly out and she'd have a new paper and it was just like a machine working off. And anyways, one day I found out that Grandma Wilma found out that they were going to be going to word processing. And she said, you know what? I'm retiring. I can't do this. This is brand new technology. I can't afford to get into it. I don't have the time. I've been typing for all this. And I'm a great typist. Well, guess what, Keith? Somebody convinced her to at least do a demonstration. So they said, okay. So the person's showing the demonstration, typing on the keyboard, this little keyboard with the screens here. And the person stopped and made a mistake and hit the backspace key. And my
She was
grandma
like,
Wilma said,
what did you just do?
yeah, that's exactly what she said. She said, what did you just do there? And he said, well, I made a mistake. And so I hit the backspace key. Well, apparently my grandma Wilma's shrill was so loud that thought the fire alarms had gone off in the building. Okay. And so anyways, that revelation for my grandma Wilma was like, she ended up embracing the technology. She stayed with the company and worked another, 10 plus years as an amazing word processing. She no longer was using her typewriter. And I think that there's what we're going to do with AI is we've got to make sure that there's my goal in my class is I'm trying to find where is that use case that I can show you. In my grandma Wilma's case, it was, this is a great device. It's no longer going to be making mistakes. And it's going to save me time. And if I can show you a use case of where I can use this overly ambitious intern AI agent that is going to help you in your job, more power to us all.
I think
So
that's
I'm excited.
that's a great story. And it's a great example of how, when you're pushing change on people, the old adage, like everybody loves change, just not, they don't like to be changed. But it's so true. Like whenever, like if any of us sees like this new invention, this better way of doing something, we're all usually like, oh, wow, yeah, that's good for me.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
a lesson that I try to think of if I'm sharing an idea, trying to pitch something. If it isn't picked up, I try to think like, what is it that's different about the way they're seeing this and the way I'm seeing this? It's like from one side, it looks like such a good idea. From the other side, it hasn't clicked yet. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
demonstration is a good example. Do you have some examples or, cause like once you train somebody to do one thing, like, okay, they've learned one thing, but I think the interesting thing about AI is that it's more of like a pattern there's just so many things that you can do with it.
It's a Swiss Army knife, isn't it? It's a Swiss Army knife out there.
I want to spend just a minute talking about this training course that you did with the University of Utah, because I've seen some companies and some universities. A lot of people talk about how the education model in the world is, up for disruption. Clayton Christensen, The Innovator's Dilemma, years ago, had a talk about how education was one of these industries that's ripe for disruption. I think you said that this course that you have, you don't have to like be a full-time student at the University of Utah to take this course.
No, yeah, it's actually through professional education. And so professional education, you just pay for the course and we actually are doing it online, which is nice. So if you're outside of Utah, which is a plus, but the actual class itself is 2 3-hour sessions for the first one. And it's really diving deep. And the way I try to teach the class, it's interesting you say about how the education has been disrupted. Well, the way I teach this class, guess what? I'm using my AI agent. My use case of using AI is using this class. So as we go through the class, I'm going to have you to be doing prompts. And those prompts are going to help you learn about artificial intelligence, machine language, all these things that we don't know about. And even better, now you can save it for yourself and you're going to be getting practice on knowing how to do the prompting. And then at the very end, of course, we're going to go through and ask our overly ambitious intern and say, you know what, we ended up putting together about 12 or 13 different prompts. Can you combine all that prompt into one prompt so I don't have to do it again? Or better yet, so I can give it to my friend if they want to be able to do that. And we then, it puts it together for you and builds a really nice prompt. And then, you eventually will build these nice prompt libraries. So I don't need to ever have to worry about that again. So if I need to do it again, I can just repeat, right?
Yeah.
It's like building a macro in Excel, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I love
So if
it.
I need to do this prompt again,
What kind of place do you store the prompts in that you're using? You put these in note docs? Do you have a
variety of places. Right now, I mainly keep the project inside of chat. And then I also use the same thing in Claude. My two go-tos right now are Claude, which I really like. Claude is going to be a little bit more thorough, and ChatGPT does a great job of building these projects.
so interesting. I mean, I think that's just such a good way of just learning. Like you said, like see somebody else do something,
Yeah.
such good opportunities to learn. And particularly right now where the world is changing so much,
Yeah.
I've shared with a lot of our folks internally at the company that I'm devoting my little internal commitment is I watch at least one YouTube video every night that has something to do with AI just as part of my after school activities. It's not on my employer's time necessarily, but it's like I realize that this is a time when the world is changing and I don't want to be left behind necessarily. I want to try to stay up on it, and just listening to the stories and seeing what other people doing is such a good way to just learn little tidbits.
Yeah, it's moving really fast, isn't it? Yeah, my biggest concern is when we put a course together that it's going to change and it's going to morph, right? And
Yeah.
so I was fearful when we put the course together that how much is it going to change? And so I do somewhat of a similar where I go through and I have a couple of colleagues out there that I follow pretty closely, and they're out there kind of digging up those gold nuggets for me. And I definitely always love being able to go through and weigh the gold of where it is, and then how can I maybe apply it. It's great to learn, but now how can I put the application, put it back in? And so I do something similar. I kind of capture, oftentimes I mainly do it for my students, because when my students come to class, sometimes have these different use cases, and my goal is to, in that first class, is let's see as many use cases as possible. I've had people where I've had one in one of my classes that they took pictures of like the ground, and they worked the BLM ground, and they needed to count sagebrush. And they found out that you can train the AI model to do that.
To count it.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
interesting.
I have a couple, I have a really weird use case I'm doing right now where I have a massive collection of 78 records. So those old 78 records that you used to crank on
Oh,
the
yeah.
old
Yeah,
Corolla,
yeah.
I've got a whole basement full of them. And so I'm right now in the process of training my AI model to be able to read the label. And even better yet, guess what? I'm using an Oculus headset, a Quest 3, to be able to just look at each record. And I basically go like this. And the Oculus headset picks up every one of them for me. I feed it into my AI engine, and I can do about 3,000 at a time, and it reads every one of the labels with 100% accuracy and drops it into my database.
That's such a good example. I never would have thought of that.
So
That's a
fun.
good
Yeah,
one.
just, those are just some of these use cases. So my hope is in the class that people are going to be able to see these use cases, right? Which is, I think, what businesses are trying to do too is, what are the parts, first thing, what are the parts of the job I don't really want to do? Or what are the parts in our department that we don't really want to do and what we can automate? But in order to do that, we have to go back to this lean principle, right? You've got to do the learning to see model. You've got to map it out. I think people who understand value stream mapping are going to be in incredibly demand,
Yeah.
because the issue that I've seen out there so far is we understand our process, we put it in AI, and the process was bad in the first place. You probably read about that, and all you're doing is you're just automating a really bad process.
Yeah. Don't automate waste, they say, right?
Could you imagine the power of being able to understand the process, make the process better, but then put it into an AI agent? That's a double win for a company. So that I'm so excited about the whole avenue of lean and continuous improvement is going to the need for it is even going to be even stronger. That's my prediction.
Absolutely. Again, that's part of our mission here at the podcast is to sing that song and to encourage and inspire people to dive into this, whether you call it lean, continuous improvement, business improvement, agile. I mean, it's a lot of different languages that all have a lot of similar mindset, behavior pattern. I'd say growth mindset, adapting to change, being
Love it.
proactive, a lot of just core values that I resonate with. that are part of these methodologies. And I can tell you're passionate about it too. You get very excited about it. I enjoy listening to your stories and hear you get excited, because it makes me excited about it too. So
It's going to be a
that's
fun
super
future.
fun to me.
I'm so excited.
Reed, I want to move into the last section here. I call this the rapid fire. So these are just some
Yes,
kind
I
of
love it.
short questions, brief answers, top of mind stuff. The most important job of a leader is to blank.
Be a fantastic coach, both to the individual as well as to the team.
Do you have a favorite go-to problem-solving tool?
I love the kata tool.
Explain
And for
that to
those
us.
who aren't familiar with kata, basically you figure out where you're going, capture current state, future state, and then where are the experiments you need to be able to get to. That's my
I love it. I love it. Yeah, that's a great one. Is there a book or a couple of books that you recommend?
so like my two go-to books that I always give to people all the time is How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by uh by and then the second one is Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. And then which it was one of those very, very first self-help books out there, and fascinating book out there. The two books that changed my life within the last couple years was 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. We have 4,000 weeks on this earth life. I used to do a ton of time management, Keith. I always tell myself now I'm like Oliver Burkeman. I'm a recovering time management person, enjoying life. And then the second book that was just absolutely that just kind of rocked my world at the time was Quit, the book Quit. So, anyways,
I love a good book recommendation.
yeah, super.
Finish this sentence. Continuous improvement is
There is no finish line.
finish line. That's a good one. Do you have a favorite question?
That I like to ask
Yeah,
sometimes.
like you like to use.
Yeah, I always like to ask, am I missing something?
This is
Oftentimes as a leader, one of the skill that I had to learn was I had to learn to listen. And I really had to learn on that. So I always like to ask the question, is there something that I'm missing here?
excellent. Well, Reed, it's been a real pleasure having you on the podcast here today. This has been a fun
Same here.
conversation. Your enthusiasm is infectious, and hopefully we've done the job of exciting a couple of people to go look up a couple of new terms, or to
Great.
just get interested in either your course on AI or something about the continuous improvement discipline. If somebody wants to get connected with you, what's the best way to do that after the pod here?
Yeah, have them reach out to LinkedIn. I'm pretty good about responding right back to LinkedIn. So anything throughout the podcast, feel free to connect in.
Okay. And it's Reed Shell, ReedShell.
Yep. Just like gasoline. And
Well, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
It's been a pleasure here. I'm just thrilled to be here, and thank you for the opportunity.
You
Very
bet.
great.
Thanks, Reed. For our listeners, if you would like to ask a question or suggest a guest, if you have any ideas for episodes, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well, Keith Norris. And this concludes this episode of KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to add a comment. You can like or follow, connect with us on the socials, and share the podcast with friends or colleagues who are as passionate about continuous improvement as you are. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, keep driving progress and sparking change.